A lot of you are going to get pissed off at me for what I say. First, remember, I signed up for that, okay? That's what Let's Get After It is all about. You want to fight? Let's fight. I'm here for it, okay? Because there is right and there is wrong. And you are missing what this embassy attack was. You think it's about others. It's about us on two levels. Who did it and who's going to be next, okay? And we don't talk about this enough, and shame on me for feeding so much of the BS that we allow to distract ourselves. The latest terror murder is proof of everything we are really battling against, and I mean we, okay? Not MAGA versus the left and how many seats they can get so that they can get the money and pointing the fingers and prosecuting each other. That's all BS done to divide us for their advantage. Extreme Islamism. Not Muslims, not just Islam, not just Islamism, but extreme Islamism. Okay? That is the wellspring of terrorism, and it is an underrated threat in America. 9/11 is too long ago, apparently, and we are paying more attention to the threat of trans athletes than of terrorists recruiting and radicalizing the most vulnerable population in America, young men. The young man who murdered two Israeli embassy staffers, 30-year-old Yaron Lishinsky and 26-year-old Sarah Milgram, is a perfect example of the problem. He shouts "Free Palestine" not because he is from there or understands the place, but because as a young brown man, he identifies with the oppression and he has been conditioned to do that. We know the shooter is a far-left activist, caught on camera shouting "Free Palestine," and as he was arrested, he kept chanting the slogan and said, "I did it for Gaza." So why the F are all these people on the left saying "if true"? And if that's who he is, and if he's not an IDF plant, and you don't want any of the blame for what just happened on you? He is described as what he is. He said what he said. Stop asking why people who understand what we're up against, like Douglas Murray, caution Joe Rogan against his comic buddies bashing Israel for sport and to develop a following. Prosecutors allege this guy fired nearly 24 bullets in this attack because he wanted to kill as many as he could. And we know what's feeding the fire, right? Don't pretend to not know what this is about. The man has been conditioned to identify with the oppression in Gaza as if he's one of them, and there are so many like him here, in our families, on our campuses. Did he know one of his victims wasn't a Jew? I love how people are using that as it somehow mitigates what this was about. You know he didn't know, right? He was there to kill Jews, obviously. But imagine if you're right, and he did know that one of them was not Jewish. So now they're targeting not just Jews, but those who stand with Jews?
Once launched, this dental appliance received an explosive...
If it's not true, and I doubt it is, that he knew, it is certainly what Islamists instruct on the extreme side. Here on American soil. Did he know that the two people he murdered were leaving an event that was about coordinating more aid to Gaza? Would it even matter when he's constantly told that Israel is starving as part of a genocide? And many feeding his broken brain are in America in positions of influence and power. And even though some same people are now saying they're disgusted by this, even though it's the latest manifestation of their efforts. And they're saying they're against anti-Semitism, like the Squad and its putative leader, AOC. Absolutely nothing justifies the murder of innocents. Anti-Semitism is a threat to all we hold dear as a society. It must be confronted and rooted out everywhere. Did I miss the word Jews in there in terms of who was killed? Odd omission. Odd omissions. They're not just innocents. He just didn't go into a school and fire away. He was looking for Jews. You know, the people you say are conducting a genocide. Those people. Now, of course, AOC doesn't just say what I just read, right? Nor do her colleagues, right? And it's all those other signals and suggestions that foment what we saw here and on our campuses. And you can make the case. Hold it. You can make the case. Don't draw a moral equivalency between the murder of two and the murder of thousands. Okay. In Gaza. Okay. But what are you leaving out in that? I'll tell you what the parallel is. Okay. These murders were precipitated by hate of Jews, just like October 7th. And what's happening in Gaza is being done by the people who were targeted. And Hamas, not freedom fighters, terrorists, refused to disarm, refused to stop hiding among civilians, refused to stop stealing the aid for civilians, and refused to return who they stole. And these two victims did nothing to this guy who killed them, whereas the people in Gaza, many of whom don't support Hamas, but many who do, October 7th is on Hamas. And until they turn over their people and surrender, how can you draw a moral equivalence between what Israel is doing and what started that? You can say it's too much. Of course it is. You can say there should be more aid. Of course there should. But the nexus of all of it necessarily goes back to the terrorists who started it, who are still there, with the tacit, if not open, respect and support of many people in this country. We have no idea how deep this problem goes here at home. Democrats, my brothers and sisters, I understand why you're worried about Trump. I understand why you call him an ultimate evil, but I don't agree. And if you want the ultimate evil, look at the Islamists, the extreme ones in America, not just Muslims. And mind your dogs who are doing their bidding. What am I talking about? Look online to the reaction. Americans calling a terrorist a hero again, saying he, like the healthcare CEO murderer, was justified in violence. It's the same thing I've heard in Iraq and Afghanistan, but now echoing from Indiana. This is not a one-off. It's just one more of what we choose to ignore. You remember that Islamist who drove a pickup truck with an ISIS flag attached through Bourbon Street, killing 14 people, injuring dozens and dozens more? You know, he's a citizen from Texas, right? And we used to see that as an irony, right? Wow, from Texas. That's like the last place you'd expect a Muslim extremist from, right? Wrong. Texas is ground zero for what I'm talking about. Did you know there's a push to create an Islamic residential development there? 1,000 homes, K through 12, faith-based school, a mosque, shops, insular community. What's wrong with that? Everything. Here, we assimilate. Here, the struggle is to remove the distinctions, the melting of the melting pot. That's what we're trying to reduce. The religious leader pushing for the project has openly admired the Muslim Brotherhood. Who are they? I'll tell you. Openly defended Hamas's killing of innocent civilians on October 7th. The developers initially advertised that the community would limit sales to only persons we believe will contribute to the overall makeup of our community. Meaning who?
Lucidchart makes intelligent diagramming easy and helps your best ideas become real. Start from scratch.
We'll go to finance a local mosque, deterring non-Muslims, right? Now, before you say, hey, stop targeting Muslims, I'm not, okay? For me, I do not believe in demonizing an entire faith, and sure as hell, not all of the people who decide to believe in it. I agree that that is a mistake on both fronts. But remember what I said. The person who is the leader of this effort in Texas, what he said about Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. What is the goal of the Muslim Brotherhood? Reject Western influence, create Islamic governments around the world to enforce Sharia on societies. Many countries designate them as a terror agency. I'm shocked Trump hasn't. The ideological cradle for Hamas and Al-Qaeda is the Muslim Brotherhood. They've been in the United States since the 60s, but they've morphed, metastasized. There's a malignancy, and it's spreading here in America. Their members aim to convert as many people as possible so that one day a majority of Americans will create a government under Sharia law. That's their goal. And guess who's been funding what we've been seeing on the campuses? The Brotherhood. You know who else funds a lot of bad stuff there? Here, not there, here. The guys who just gifted Trump a plane. That's who. That country's been crucial in funding the Muslim Brotherhood. Another report found that the Muslim Brotherhood funds a group called the American Muslims for Palestine, directly funding the popular campus protest group Students for Justice in Palestine. And another group, the Muslim Student Association, was founded by members of the Muslim Brotherhood. And another group that funds the student protests, called the Samadown Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network, has been sanctioned by the Treasury Department for raising money for the Gaza terror organization, PFLP. So, this is what I need you to understand, all right? It's too simple to say it's horrible that Jews were targeted here in America. Get used to it. They're not safe anywhere. And they have to be defended for what they represent about all of us everywhere. That's how big this is. Every one of these things, every time it happens, oh no, it's just him, it's just this, it is all connected. What's going on with him, what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on our campuses. You think that we are an island here. You think that because there is a relatively small Muslim community in America, that it doesn't really matter. You're wrong. And it is in this context that I look at what's happening at Harvard University. It is a no-brainer argument for me to say the president can't tell a university who to let in and not let in. It can tell them to not have discriminatory practices if they want to get any government funding, but you can't say no international students. half of our Nobel winners for America have come from somewhere else. It's easy to make that argument. And it may well be the right argument. But it is not the only argument. Not in the context of what we're talking about and what we're seeing right now. How many killers are being made on campus? So I get it. I'm not saying it should win as an interest, but I get it. Questioning their ability at a place like Harvard that stubbornly resists what it is an enabling on campus, and questioning its ability to enroll international students if it's going to keep picking ones that want to kill Jews. Now, this would be a massive financial blow to the nation's wealthiest college, since nearly a third of their student body are international students, and I think that probably makes them a stronger university. The DHS secretary posted today that Harvard has lost their student and exchange visitor program certification as a result of their failure to adhere to the law. Let this serve as a warning to all universities and academic institutions across the country. Warn about what? Let's bring in former White House ethics czar and Harvard law grad Norm Eisen and former acting DHS deputy secretary under Trump, Ken Cuccinelli. Cooch, you there?
Good to see you.
All right, we're figuring out Norm's comms, but I wanted to come to you first anyway, Ken. So you heard what I just said,
okay.
And why I get what's going on right now in the sensitivity. As a lawyer first, wear your lawyer hat. Tell me why this could be okay for the administration to do, and then what's your take on the policy?
They don't believe how toxic this is. If you're still...
Every school signs up for the SEVIS program. I'll call it the SEVIS program, just to stick with the acronym. And they have lots of requirements of oversight. They have a school official who is the lead liaison there. And DHS during the spring has been making requests for information to Harvard consistent with the regulation governing this. And Harvard is not responding in a way that the administration considers adequate on a repeated basis. So they finally yanked the privilege of getting international students coming into the university. I don't know whether they mean that to grandfather the ones who are there, or whether they're going to pull the F-1 visas even of students who are there. Both are possible, but it's not entirely clear to me yet which of those they're doing. And at Harvard, international students are about a quarter of the student body, which I know a lot of people will find rather surprising. It's not the only university like that, but right. It is a very high proportion.
All right, Norm, let me bring you on the legal side. We're kind of treating you like a whistleblower. I keep blurring your face for the audience every 5 seconds. I don't know why, but hopefully the shot will stabilize. Ken's argument is Harvard did not comply with the reporting requirements that the government requires as part of this program. That's why this is happening, so legally it's legit. What do you say?
Ken has got to be the only person in the country who believes that's the real reason for what's going on here, Chris. This is part of Donald Trump's revenge and retaliation tour. This is not going to hold up in a court of law, just like over 150 judges of both parties have rejected similar illegalities by Donald Trump. This violates the Administrative Procedures Act. It's arbitrary and capricious. Harvard has provided this information. Suddenly, the Trump administration is finding that they didn't. Why are they singling them out from all other American universities? Come on. This is about forcing Harvard to bend the knee. It's outrageous. It's unconstitutional. It's contrary to law. And it's cruel to these students and to the Harvard community. It's sickening.
Ken, I'm coming back to you, but hold on one second. Norm, is a little bit of that outrage misplaced given what we just witnessed at the embassy and what we know is going on in terms of radicalization from the Muslim Brotherhood, and what we know is echoing their sentiments on a lot of these campus protests? It's absolutely at Harvard. Norm, what about that piece?
Did you know that you can call your soulmate into your life right now? Here's how.
Heart breaks for those two innocent people who were killed in that cruel act of anti-Semitism. But the way to deal with that is not to punish 7,000 students who come to the United States, who end up being the best ambassadors for the United States, who had nothing to do with that episode in Washington, D.C., Chris. We're talking about Cambridge, Massachusetts here. And when you have the administration engaging in these acts of retaliation and revenge unconstitutionally, it's a totally separate thing. Donald Trump has his own problems with anti-Semitism, as do those in his administration. I categorically reject the comparison.
Well, it's hard to find a president who's embraced Israel more than Donald Trump has in recent history. But I take your policy argument. Ken, the policy argument is you're punishing thought. That's what you're doing. The retaliation against the university, that is, I need proof of the intentionality. But you're punishing thought, and you're not supposed to do that. Academic freedom is part of the extension of the First Amendment.
So the president campaigned on bringing these universities to heel, and in terms of this outrageous anti-Semitism, anti-Americanism, and look, the Trump administration wasn't playing games when they made these comments. They said this is part of the problem, that Harvard is only the beginning. Other universities can expect the same treatment under the Code of Federal Regulations that gives the federal government the authority to do exactly what they're doing with Harvard, and that is cut off student visas. Look, I appreciate Norm, but his rant about the just general illegality is not accurate. Read the regulation. They may fight over whether the information provided back to the administration is adequate or not, but if in my time at DHS, the general quality of the work done to maintain CVIS by these universities of all kinds, including Ivy League, was very, very poor. They're not likely in a very good position to fight back against the Trump administration, and it is about more than just whether they get international students. It is, as the Trump administration said, they've been supportive of the CCP on that campus. They've allowed anti-Semitism to run rampant, not just threats, but physical assaults. And so Harvard is losing a privilege, not a right, to have foreign students coming to the university. Mm-hmm. And I expect to see more universities to have the same thing done at their university as well.
Norm, give me a quick last word, please.
The president's actions must comport with the Constitution and laws. That same CVIS program relating to foreign students, Trump administration abuses were just enjoined today, Chris, in San Francisco by a federal court. Ken knows these issues well because while he was at DHS, they had to settle paying millions of dollars out because of family separations. Whatever the president can do legally in theory, in practice, it must not be arbitrary and capricious. It must not be done to exact a penalty of revenge. That's what's going on here. We all know it. It won't stand up in court.
Well, we'll see who has been really influential to me as someone who speaks truth to power on the issues that are at play in this embassy murder, okay? A well-known journalist, international journalist, who says she was retaliated against for arguing that Israel has a right to defend itself, okay? Then I want to bring in a guy I also lean on about the state of terror in America to explain how bad this can get and is getting and what has to be done that isn't. Next. Former Australian TV host, been very outspoken in her support of Israel, so much so she's received a lot of death threats, a lot of pushback professionally and personally. I also want to bring in former FBI and CIA counterterror official Phil Mudd. It's good to have you both. Aaron, I start with you. I don't know, first of all, it's great to almost meet you in person. We've been talking a lot about these issues and what they mean. You heard what I said up at the top. What do you believe the American audience needs to understand about what radicalized this guy who is not Palestinian, who is not Muslim, but certainly became an agent for the Muslim Brotherhood?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Chris. I really appreciate it. I think your words were spot on at the start of your show. You absolutely nailed it. This is one of the greatest threats that we face. Yes, the rising threat of China, absolutely. Look at Qatar, look at Iran. Extremism that already exists in the Western world is utterly terrifying. We've seen a first-hand example of that. What I would say to the American public is I care deeply about children in Gaza. The thought of any child hurting is heartbreaking. But I understand who their enemy is. I understand what the threat is. And it's not Israel. It is Islamic extremism. It is terrorism. So if you want to march in the streets and you want to jump onto a cause, do it. We all should. We all should fight vehemently for every single child. But you've got to understand who their enemy is, or you will create circumstances like we saw last night, and that is absolutely tragic.
You know, Phil, you and I have talked about this a lot, you know, and in the years after 9/11, there was a lot of worry. There was basically a case in every state where officials in one of the agencies that you've worked at were trying to identify this homegrown extreme Islamist threat, and then we just decided to worry about other things. What is this a reminder of, what we just witnessed in D.C.?
In some ways, it's a reminder of the transition from a foreign problem, that is the al-Qaeda problem, that a lot of people in America, I think, thought was overseas, to a homegrown problem that is going into 2005, 2010, 2015, a problem like ISIS that we saw, as you said, in 50 states across America, not necessarily connected to Pakistan or Afghanistan, but kids in states and cities across America who said, I want to join up with this movement. But this is bigger. You try to define for me, Chris, the number of people across America who are pro-Palestinian compared to, let's say, pro-Al-Qaeda or pro-ISIS. There's got to be millions, maybe tens of millions. We never saw that in 2010. You take that down, distill that down to the number of those people who might say that violence is appropriate. In some ways, Chris, I guess you could compare this to the homegrown problem we saw 15 years ago, but the numbers don't match up. You cannot stop this. You cannot, as long as war continues. Not a question about who's right or wrong. Numbers game. You can't stop it, Chris.
So, Aaron, how do you deal with people saying, and I know it's a circular argument, but the toll in Gaza is so much greater in magnitude in terms of number and depth of despair than what happened on October 7th, that the argument becomes October 7th, bad, this, worse.
Chris, what I would say to that, and you're right, again, I reiterate the point that it is utterly devastating. Anybody suffering anywhere in the world who is innocent, my heart breaks for. But you need to understand the position that Israel is in at the moment. And let me say, I'm not Israeli, I'm not Jewish. If on October 8 every hostage had been returned and Hamas had laid down their arms, you could absolutely argue that continued military action in Gaza would be revenge motivated, would not be proportionate to what occurred. But Hamas, on the day of the first ceasefire that was brokered, came out and said publicly on TV, we will repeat what occurred on October 7. We will continue these atrocities over and over and over again. They are still sending bombs over to Israel. They still have hostages. So any anger at suffering and death in Gaza should exist and should be expressed, but we need to understand who is responsible for it. And in my mind, that is Hamas and Hamas alone.
I think it's going to happen a lot more, Phil. I hate saying that. I love being wrong about any catastrophic prediction. But this guy, I call him a kid because I'm so old now. But, this 31-year-old in D.C., I just feel like I see him on every campus. I see him every time I speak about this anywhere. A lot of times they're white, a lot of times they're brown, and they identify with the oppression. And it's almost like they're looking for something to belong to where it just happens that America's the target. And let's be honest, Phil, when have we ever seen since the 60s it being more appealing to attack America as an American than right now?
Chris, I hate to agree with you, but I would. I mean, if you look at the characteristics of terrorism, which I followed since the early 90s, there are characteristics you look at. Leadership, there is leadership. We're talking obviously about Hamas, and Hamas can message around the world. There's an issue of openness in this country. Obviously, you have the right to free speech, so you can speak about being pro-Palestinian. But there is this, in the world that I followed years ago at the CIA and the FBI, messaging is critically important. If you look at even the change in messaging globally over the past month, the Europeans are starting to say Israel is wrong. There's a lot of Americans who are uncomfortable with what's happening with Israel. So in the environment where there are a lot of young people absorbing a message, the message being that Israel is too aggressive in what they're doing, that message is becoming more and more prominent in the West. And that means more and more young people are going to start to say, the Israelis got to pay, right or wrong, good or bad. It is obviously bad. There's going to be people who pay. I think you're right. We're going to see more of it.
Oh, I'll tell you why. Because this war will end, but they don't need it to be Israel. They were coming after us. There are plenty of people in the region who see us as 100 times worse than Israel, and there's going to be ample opportunity. And you're right. In America, you get to say whatever you say, and you can organize, and you can do all these things that other places don't let you do. And we're literally architects of our own disadvantage, and that's the burden of a democracy. Hey, Aaron, I hope we get to have a lot more conversations. I know you're doing so much work all around the world. I'm always available if you can come on from anywhere to discuss what's happening and why. Thank you for doing it tonight, okay? And to be continued. All right, Phil.